Good evening, everybody. It's the 28th of July, 2020, Tuesday. We're in the great city of Providence, Rhode Island. We have Melissa from the city clerk's office and Sean, our clerk here. I want to thank them both, by the way, for doing a great job in these trying times. Mr. Clerk and his entire staff. We're going to start off and start this meeting and do a roll call. Madam Clerk? Present.
Vice Chairwoman Marsh. Councilwoman Castillo. Councilwoman Anthony.
Present.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Thank you. We have the quorum.
You have 3 present, 2 absent, you have 4.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we have Ken Cheverini from the police office present, Gina Costa, the internal auditor, Renee Almonte.
So noted.
We also have Councilman Fortune present, Councilman Miller present, and I think also the treasurer, Jim Lombardi, present. Okay. So, committee members, if we could, we're going to go through this really quick. We take an item out of order and get it off the docket. Take a motion, take item number 5 out of order, please.
So moved.
Councilman Taylor, is that a second?
Second.
Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Is Mr. Mancini want to talk about this?
Yes.
Budget acquisition. Mr. Clerk, can you swear the individuals in the administration who is going to testify?
Mr. Chief and anyone else who plans to testify, could you please raise your right hand and swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Lawrence Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, City of Providence.
Mr. Parada?
Leo Parada, Director of Public Works.
Mr. Mahoney?
Kevin Mahoney, Acting Director of Public Property.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Mancini, you going to take the lead on this one?
I will, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. Good evening. Working with Mr. Parada at Public Works, and we have briefed, in fact, this afternoon as well to refresh our information. Before the committee this evening, Mr. Chairman, is a contract renewal requested of Waste Management. It calls for 2 components that makes up the $7,143,000. There is the garbage pickup, and then there's the recycling. The garbage pickup includes yard waste. It is important to note, Mr. Chairman, that the benefit in this contract will be extended to the city under the option years 3, 4, and 5 in a number of ways, including in smaller and reduced price increases, along with a incentive to the city of up to $250,000 per year on the garbage collection side. Currently, for FY21, there's expected to be a 6.9% increase in the garbage component or the trash component of the contract, with a 3.9% increase in the second year, FY22. Those 2 increases, $265,000 in FY21 over the FY20 base, and another $156,000 in FY22 over the FY21, represent a $421,000 increase in the 2 years of the garbage component. I'd like to take them separate, and then I will do a consolidated summary of the 2 components. Staying with trash, which is basically garbage and yard waste, if we move to option years 3, 4, and 5, the increases are very slight. It's a 0.006 in year 3 and in year 4, with a 3% increase in year 5. Taken together over a 5-year period, it will represent an average of 3% per year. At the end of the 5th year, if we exercise those options, the total cost of the contract would be at $4,332,203, compared to today's FY20 contract of $3,734,200, for a net change in that portion of the contract of $597,503, with an offset of $250,000 per year for each of the 3 option years, which will give the city a net credit of $750,000 to be applied to both sides of the contract trash and recycling or for any other city service use within the trash and recycling component. As I move to recycling component, and we break it down that way so that we can track expenditures, in the FY21 year, the recycling is expected to increase by 4.1% in both FY21 and FY22. An increase as follows: a $211,800 increase in FY21, followed by a $128,000 increase, $129,004 in FY22, bringing the total of that portion of the contract to $3,272,000. The following increases in percentage have been applied in years 3, 4, and 5: 0.006 in year 3, 0.006 in year 4, and a 3% change in year 5, making the total net sum of that portion of the contract in year 5 $3,411,665, or an increase of $479,465. For the benefit of the committee, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to give you the summary. The garbage and yard waste increase, if we go over a 5-year contract, two base years and 3 option years, would be a net sum increase in the garbage and yard waste of $597,503 from the FY20 existing contract today. And in the recycling component, it would be a $479,465 increase. Taken together, it would be a $1,076,968 increase. And then we would apply a $750,000 rebate, making the net sum of these two components over the next 5 years $326,968 change, roughly less than 5% over the 5 years. I will be willing to take questions on the calculation, but I defer to Mr. Parada, who conducted the negotiations and did an outstanding job in getting the city the best contract available. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Parada?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So if I may, the contract negotiations were lengthy. The city made its position known to Waste Management that we were not interested in going for a full 5-year set contract. We then, after some deliberations, came to an agreement that we would come to an agreement on a 2-year contract with an option to extend. And with that, Waste Management came to the table and gave the city the line item in the contract, which made years 3, 4, and 5 that much more attractive to the city if we wish to go in that direction. And that, simply put, is the line item which states that Waste Management of Rhode Island shall allocate $750,000 to the city for its use in undertaking of city services, including but not limited to solid waste and recycling collection services, to be remitted equally over the extended term of the agreement. In addition to that, Waste Management will continue to allocate, in this case, $30,000 per year for public education programs, measures on an annual basis, as well as include $32,000 per year for replacement carts that are damaged during collection or that are beyond their useful life. Those two line items have been fairly standard in previous contracts as well. There are also provisions in here to explore other features, which include looking at making bulk items, the requesting of picking up bulk items online through Waste Management. They will work with the city to streamline the access for the residents of the city, because we all know that sometimes it can be difficult using the phone, or it may take a long time for people to get through. They will also participate in any pilot program related to organic collection and diversion if we go in that direction in future years, and make staff available to discuss design of the pilot program. They will also provide service up to 10 carts weekly per location at a cost of $50 per month for other municipal locations, which we believe will save us in our recycling costs, which we have done through other vendors that we use throughout the city. So for instance, through public buildings, whether that's school department, public properties, recreation centers, parks department, we can look to see if we can have savings in that area as well. So that's another added benefit to the program. There is also a provision to look at the bulky waste system and look at ways to make changes, modifications, enhancements to help mitigate costs on going down the road.
You want anything else? Councilwoman Anthony has a question. Councilwoman?
Yes, Director Parada, who administers the $30,000 in the education program? Who would be in charge of the outreach on that and the education, the recycling education?
Good question. So that is Maureen McManus, Associate Director of Environmental Services. She will operate that fund, use it towards outreach to make sure that people are recycling properly. And I have to say she's very creative, and she will put good use to that money. She'll make sure that it reaches the intended targeted audience in efforts to increase our recycling rate throughout the city.
May I ask one follow-up question, Mr. Chair?
Councilwoman, you have the mic.
Thank you. Do we have 30,000 to spend? Have we been spending 30,000 a year in prior years, or have we had money allocated for outreach, recycling, education?
I can't answer for prior years. I know it's been allocated. I'm not sure to what extent. I know this year she has used the money. She has developed a program. She's distributing magnets throughout the city to residents, which are being distributed right now on proper way to recycle. And that's one small component of that. And they will be distributed to every single resident in the city. We've made them available to the council office, and we'll be making them available to the public as well throughout the course of the year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Internal Auditor?
Hi, Leo. This is year 3 of the original bid.
That is correct. In the original contract, there was a 2-year, just slightly less than 2-year contract. And there was an option in that contract to extend for 5 years. We made it clear that we did not want to extend for a definitive 5, given current conditions and given that we would be having basically midway through the new administration and basically new council. We felt that some flexibility needs to be built into that contract.
Can I continue, Mr. Chair?
Madam Auditor, you have the mic.
The $7.1 million, is that for all 3 years or just for one fiscal year?
One fiscal year.
Just
for one
fiscal year.
As for one fiscal year.
From which fiscal year? Starting this July 1st to next June?
That's correct. FY21, that's correct.
Okay, so you're going to come back every year with a new amount, and we're going to bring you in front of the committee every year. Why wouldn't you just put all of the years on and make it one contract?
That's my fault. I'm not sure why it was done that way. We submitted the whole contract to the Board of Contract and Supply. I thought it was clear that it was for multi-years, but apparently we did not make it that clear. I would agree with you that it should be for the full 5 rather than coming back multiple times, or a minimum for 2, and then you go in for years 3, 4, and 5.
But just for clarification, Mr. Chairman, this is year 3, so this is not the total amount of this contract. This is only for 1 year. We've had 2 years previous, and we're going to have 2 more additional. I would like to see it changed to reflect the total amount of the contract, and then it can be passed. And as long as there are no changes to the contract, it would not have to come before this committee. Just a recommendation.
I would support that, Mr. Chairman. I think Mr. Parada would agree with that as well.
I do.
Let the record reflect that President Pro Tem Correa is present, Councilman Goncalves is present, I think that's it. I just have a couple follow-ups. First, Turtle Loader, have you done a fiscal note on this at all?
No, I have not. I do not have a copy of the contract.
So I think it's important that that's my next follow-up question. Where's the contract itself? We're talking about approving basically, I don't know, $21 million worth of contract, right? 3 years? Is that right? Or is this looking to be awarded for 2 more years or 3 more years? I'm confused.
2 years, and then there's a new opportunity for 3 option years.
So for the sake of conversation, the council's being asked to approve basically a $14 million contract, but we don't have the contract, so we should have that. Turtle Loader, I think you need to do a fiscal note on it. Also, I'd like to understand, do we pay monthly, quarterly? How do we pay this contract? How does it work financially, Mr. Mancini?
Paid monthly.
The monthly payment?
Paid monthly payments.
Right. And so then, if I'm looking at this correct, for the sake of conversation, it's roughly about almost $600,000 a month, right? Am I reading this right, approximately?
Correct.
So, let me go to the next step. Let's talk about how many garbage trucks go out on a daily basis? Do we know?
I can get you that figure. There's various routes. I believe there's 4 or 5 per route per day. So, and we can get you that figure. I'm sure that it varies depending upon the day. Some routes are different than others.
Is there anything in the contract for us to try to get our garbage company to get to zero emissions? With the advent of new technology which is happening out there, I see the hybrid RIPTA buses out there. You see the electric RIPTA buses out there. You see the combination where emissions have gone down dramatically with those big buses that, are going around the city almost like, 10, 12 hours a day, right? We always talk about creating a better environment in the city proper. It doesn't hurt to start with our private contractors. So I'm wondering, is there anything in the present contract that talks about getting this company, towards some type of zero emissions? So this way, when those big garbage trucks come down our streets and our neighborhoods, it's less diesel fuel, And by the way, also, the costs go down too, because you're not paying for fuel and stuff like that. Is there anything in the present contract that says that right now? Or something like that?
I don't have anything in there. No.
Now, since you said you worked to renegotiate this contract, what I would be looking for, one of the things besides information in the internal inspection, is that we should have some type of process for them to get to zero emissions, or have to convert their fleet in Providence proper to like a hybrid fleet, which uses, less emissions, right? So, since they are looking for a long-term relationship with us, what I would look to the committee is that, first of all, I think it's important that the internal audit gets the contract as a fiscal note. So I look for the committee that we probably continue this matter, let those 2 elements happen. Then I would also ask, the committee agrees, and I would presume you would, that could Mr. Prado go back to the company and see if we can plug in some type of environmental get to zero emissions process. Means like, since they're looking for what, 3 years and another 5 years, is that right? Eventually we're talking 3, is it an option for another 5 years, is that correct?
2 years.
So 2 and 3 options. 2 with 3 options.
I'm sorry, Mr. Suzanne.
2 years with 3-year option.
2 years, then just 1 3-year option?
That is correct.
Or a total of 5 years?
That is correct.
Okay. So, since they want us to exercise our option, could you go back and see, do they have any plans? And if so, maybe this is something where we can start having that conversation now, that maybe year 4 or 5, and, every morning I always look at our buses, up at our bus fleet. We have, when school starts, hopefully in earnest, we have hundreds of buses starting up, basically, actually in my neighborhood. They start up in my neighborhood, which has one of the highest percentage of asthma. And the bus yards in my neighborhood, and they all start up in the morning. Hundreds of yellow buses. But yet there's no incentive to get those buses to a zero emissions. So, I know we no longer, the school department now is in the auspices of the state of Rhode Island. But that's something where that should have been pushed for. So, what I would look for is, Mr. Parada, can you go back to the company and start having that conversation now? See if maybe we can put that into this contract now, then maybe they could agree to lower their emissions.
Be happy to go back.
That's where I am. So, committee members, do you think that sounds reasonable? Councilman Anthony? Councilman Taylor? So I would ask, I'll just continue to next week. That's okay. We'll continue to next week. This way the auditor can have the fiscal note done. She can have the contract. And Mr. Parada, can you reach out to the company and see if they'd be willing to create some type of process to get to zero emissions?
Absolutely.
So, any other comments or questions by committee members?
Yeah. Mr. Yes.
Anthony?
Yeah, I would just say I think it's always good to have that conversation. We have a very aggressive environmental goals that we have to meet as a state, and so I always think that should be part of the contract negotiation if at all possible. And I appreciate Director Parada, his efforts on this behalf.
Great. So with that, no other comments or questions? The motion to continue this item?
So moved.
By Councilman Taylor, second by Councilman Anthony.
Second.
Discussion, gentlemen, you know what we're looking for, right? And please provide the information to the internal auditor.
Absolutely.
No further comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Yes, for the, I thought that'd be brief, but it's not. So let's do a motion. Very quickly, committee members, a motion to continue items 1, 2, and 3. A motion to continue those items.
So moved.
All right, Councilman Anthony, my Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Great. All right, Mr. Clerk, item number 4, please. Oh, excuse me, Madam Clerk.
Item number 4, resolution authorizing approval of the following contract by the Board of Contracts and Supplies in accordance with Section 21/26A.
Okay.
1,000 Youth Summer Employment Program, Office of Economic Opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Mancini, are you going to explain this?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to my colleague, Ms. Fonseca, and I believe Ms. Diana Perdomo is available for conversation as well. I'd ask that they both be sworn in at this time.
All right, sure.
Ms. Perdomo, Ms. Fonseca, are you both present?
Yes.
Ms. Perdomo, I see, okay, she's, let me.
Okay.
Could you, please, Ms. Perdomo, could you please, along with Ms. Fonseca, could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, yes.
Could you please, state your name and title for the record, Ms. Perdomo and Ms. Fonseca?
Colleen Fonseca, Director of Workforce Development and Economic Opportunity.
Diana Perdomo, Chief of Policy for the City of Providence.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Perdomo or Ms. Fonseca, who would like to speak first on that?
I think for any programmatic specific questions, it would be best to direct to Colleen.
Ms. Fonseca, do you want to speak on this matter, please?
Yes. So in February of 2020, the Office of Economic Opportunity had submitted a letter to the Board of Contract and Supply to approve our One Providence for Youth vendors following going through the Board of Contract and Supply process. This matter was then referred to the City of Providence Finance Committee, but unfortunately was not scheduled to appear on a docket. So we are here today to present on behalf of the One Providence for Youth program. Right now we have young people that are working with our community-based nonprofit organizations in the summer jobs program, and we're here today to have the dollar amount approved by the Finance Committee.
Okay. Ms. Perdomo, do you have anything else you want to say on this matter?
No, sir, other than I'm very thankful for the committee for hearing this today and for the council for engaging with us in conversation around this program over the last few months.
Okay. Any questions by committee members? All right. Internal Order, Treasurer, do you have any questions on this matter?
If I may, so
Treasurer?
we have a third party administering this. Is that correct?
Yes, so we do have multiple community-based organizations that are administering a portion of the program, yes.
And the percentage that we pay them to administer it?
So
you know what that is?
Yeah, so that really varies depending on the organization and the entity. Most of the wages and for the program that we give to the nonprofit organizations are for the youth wages. And if you give me 1 second, I can confirm what that total amount is, but it is well over 50% of the total programmatic wages go to youth wages directly.
So what would the other 50% go towards, or whatever the balance is?
Yeah, so the remaining really goes to this summer for technology improvements to make sure that young people had access to the program. This summer, we did offer the program virtually. So for things such as Wi-Fi routers, computers if they needed them. There are some students that are actually building computers as well. So we paid for any equipment related to the actual content of the program, as well as any staff fees, including like we have program administrators that are working on the program that actually run the sessions with the young people, are making sure that they're turning in their assignments, that they're doing workshops, that they're keeping in touch with their employer-based internships. So we do also have some staff salaries for those nonprofit providers as well.
Thank you.
Internal Order?
Hi, Colleen. How are you?
I'm
Gina.
good. How are you?
Good. Did you submit that worksheet that you provided to me for the committee to review?
I did. Yes, I did send that to the clerk on Monday.
Internal Order, why don't you go to a little bit what you're talking about?
Okay, so I've had many conversations with Colleen in looking at the programs. It is an Excel document, and it identifies all of the communities, all of the organizations that are involved, and how many youth to serve, how much the youth payments are, how much the vendor gets paid for executing the program. And there obviously has been a change because of COVID. And she did identify all of the changes in that, like some organizations couldn't take as many as pre-COVID. Colleen, I don't know if you want to go into that detail or review the sheet. If they can review that, I think that would be very helpful because they can see exactly what each program is doing.
Yes, absolutely. So we can go through that sheet. Do members of the council, were you all able to receive that document?
Is she talking about this?
I don't think so. I think I have something here.
Well, why don't you, we'll work through it. Why don't you?
Okay. So I'll start.
Okay, let's work through it. There you go. I think he has it. Got work through it.
Great. So one of the first organizations that we funded in the end of February was Youth in Action. We had originally funded them to work with 10 young people for an amount not to exceed $18,560. After doing some conversations and negotiations with the organization, we did just do some changes in terms of like, instead of paying for bus passes for youth, those costs would then be swapped for like technology needs. So that organization is still going to be serving 10 young people, and will still be for a limit not to exceed $18,600. The next organization that we funded was Skills for Rhode Island's Future. We had initially funded them for 15 young people. This is a pilot program working with youth that are formerly justice involved. These are young people that are either being referred by the Rhode Island courts, family courts, or exiting the Rhode Island Training School and giving them more employer-based internship experiences through Skills for Rhode Island's Future. So initially that amount was for a total not to exceed $31,000. And we did actually remain at that amount as well after doing swaps for technology and other various needs. The next one we have here is Generation Citizen. They were going to be working with 10 young people as well. For a limit not to exceed $33,750. Unfortunately, after the crisis had hit, they were unable to perform on the program due to some staff reductions that were happening and just capacity purposes. So we did actually decide to not fund their program for this summer. So now instead of the total not to exceed of $33,000, we are no longer going to be funding that organization. Next, we have PVD Young Makers, which...
Continue.
Next, we have PVD Young Makers, also here on the document reflected as Fab Newport. So this is a program to be working with 20 young people with a total not to exceed $38,000. And after negotiating with them, this amount we did stay the same. This organization was very unique in that they already had a really robust virtual programming kind of in place. This is a program to work with young people around like technology. So there wasn't a ton of changes. The bulk of changes was in technology associated costs. And then next we had the YMCA of Greater Providence. They had initially proposed to be working with 20 young people for a limit not to exceed $38,610. And after negotiating with them, they also remained the same as well, although we, yes, so that's them. The Providence Housing Authority is also another organization. We had requested to fund 20 young people for a limit not to exceed $43,925.65. And so we had kept that amount as we had actually reduced the amounts. We had eliminated $2,846 worth of costs after negotiating and going through their budget. So their new total not to exceed is $41,079.65. So we did save a little under $3,000 on that program. Next, we have Goodwill. This is for a service learning program. Initially, we had proposed for 20 young people to be in the program for a limit not to exceed $45,506.23. And after negotiating with them, we had actually kept the number of youth intact, and we had saved $8.06 after doing a revision of their contract as well, not their contract, of their proposed budgets. Next, we have CAP of Providence. We actually funded them for 2 programs, a work experience program and a service learning program. So one program that we did fund for them was a program that they ran last summer, and we did submit a letter in January to extend one of their programs from last summer that performed very well. And then they also submitted another bid this summer to us. So the program I'm talking about now, the work experience, is a program that they submitted a proposal to through the Board of Contract and Supply for this summer, but also worth noting, they also have another program that we extended their contract for. So they have 2 programs that are running. So this work experience program was for 20 young people for a limit not to exceed $46,539.93. After negotiating with them, that amount remained pretty much intact. We had some cost savings of $1.08. Next, we have the Rhode Island for Community and Justice. They initially had proposed working with 25 young people for a limit not to exceed $51,343.12. And after renegotiating with them, they're still going to be serving 25 youth. And their new total not to exceed is $49,976.17. We actually did cost savings of $1,366.95 there. Next, we have Refugee Dream Center, which was we requested to be funded for 18 youth for a limit not to exceed $57,537.36. And after negotiating with them, we did keep their funding the same and intact, just moving around some of the dollars around and for transportation costs, et cetera, those kinds of costs for refugee youth, and making it more appropriate for a virtual type of program. Next, we have Federal Hill House. We also funded them for 2 programs, both of which came through the RFP process this year. And so the first one is Federal Hill House, the Work Experience Program. Initially, we had requested to fund them for 40 youth for a limit not to exceed $76,226.97. After really negotiating with them and with as a result of COVID-19, we brought down the number of youth served from 40 to 26. And then we also reduced the total not to exceed to $65,233.40 for a cost savings of a little under $11,000. And then we had Federal Hill House, another program, which is a service learning program. We had requested to fund them for 40 positions for a limit not to exceed $85,948.77. And after the crisis hit, we renegotiated those numbers down to instead of 40 youth, 26 youth for a limit not to exceed $65,422.79, bringing the cost savings for that program down to $20,000, $20,000, give or take. And then next we have here on the chart that's provided is the organizations that we requested to extend their contracts from last year based on their performance. And so we requested to fund these top few organizations that performed very well in our program last year. And so these organizations are AS220. We had requested for them to serve 21 youth. They're still serving 21 youth. For a limit not to exceed $57,727.58. The next organization is the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Providence. We had requested for them to fund 20 youth. They're still going to be working with 20 youth for a total not to exceed $54,480.06. We also have CAP. This is the other program that I had mentioned that we had extended the contract from last year to work with 20 young people for a limit not to exceed $47,195.53. And that remained the same. And then we had also requested to fund CCAP, also known as Comprehensive Community Action Program. We had requested to fund 25 youth for a total not to exceed $44,582.16. But after really speaking with them and negotiating, they did discontinue their participation in the program, providing a cost savings of $44,582.16. And then the last organization that we requested to fund was the Institute for the Practice and Study of Nonviolence, also known as the Nonviolence Institute. We had requested that they funded 20 job positions for a limit not to exceed $53,545.75. And that number remained the same as well.
So, just so I understand, got some numbers here. What's the total cost of the program? Is it $825,159.41, or was before the council $567,628.33? Which is it?
So the total cost of the program is $711,000. and $80.65. So we had submitted 2 letters to the Board of Contract and Supply. We had submitted 1 letter in January with the organizations that we were requesting to extend their contracts, which was for a little under $300,000. I believe the total amount was 200,000, like $257,531.08. And then the Board of Contract and Supply letter that we had submitted in March for the $567,000 is for the organizations that went through the bid process that we were then requesting to be funded.
So just kind of walk me through the extension. Is there an extension clause in the present contract? Is that what you're saying? I don't see that.
So really, in speaking with the organizations, we had actually developed a rubric to assess the quality.
No. You're talking about your relationship with the organizations. That's fine. I'm asking, what was the legal basis for you to unilaterally extend the contract? How did you extend it yourself? Is that what you did?
No, so in consultation with the law department, we had designed a rubric that would assess like the quality of the programs to assess which organizations would be able to move on the next year. So some things that we scored in terms of criteria was the number of youth that they had hired.
No. You're talking to me. You're not answering the question. Where in the contract does it allow the unilateral extension of a contract? So I'm trying to understand. Mr. Massini, can you help me with that? I don't think she understands what I'm asking. Mr. Cheverini, she said the law department was involved. Can you tell me how the law department, let's talk about the extensions. Can you tell me, Mr. Cheverini, how do they unilaterally extend these contracts?
I don't know the specifics. I was told something about the contract originally had some performance guarantees that if in fact, when the contract was approved, if the organization received favorable recommendations, the contract would extend. That's the extent of my knowledge of this.
Is it the contract would extend, or would they automatically be able to get re-upped? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it was.
The contract would expire, right? Original contract expired. Wasn't it a rubric to say, okay, these organizations perform really well, so now when we re-up and go out to bid again, we're gonna just they automatically get the pass to come in. You see what I'm saying? Is that what
I do? I don't know. Colleen may be able to answer that, or Larry, but not I could inquire of Adrian Southgate, who typically would have been involved in advising.
Mr. McKinney, here's the thing, put aside the programs, they're all good. We're not going to debate the value of the program, they're all great. We understand that. We're just talking legality, following the law, and making sure that anybody runs afoul of the law. So, Mr. Mancini, can you explain to me, we actually don't even have the contract in front of us. So that's the first thing. Internal, do you have the contract, the treasurer? Do you have the contract?
No, Mr. Chair, but I think there would be multiple contracts or agreements with each vendor. I don't think it's one contract. Is that correct, Colleen?
Yes, so they are multiple contracts.
But wasn't there a scope? Wasn't there a base contract? So here's the point. If the new people that you're looking to hire, right, they should know that it sounds like you could just extend their contract unilaterally, it sounds like, based on this rubric. Whatever that is, right? So where is that in the contract? You know what I'm saying? In a private world, in private contracting, from the public practice, that kind of process sometimes creates the perception of a never-ending contract in public government. I'm trying to understand where is that in here. So, Mr. Mason, can you help us with that? How did that play out here exactly? I want to talk about the extension of the other contract.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a copy of that contract or the various contracts before me, but as I understand it, the contract was written that included a rubric for scoring and awarding. And one of the incentives was based on performance enhancement, that would allow the continuation, if you will, of that vendor already vetted and selected, and based upon their performance, they would have already met the criteria, minimum threshold to be selected for renewal. I believe that's the gist of the contract language. I do not have that before me, sir. I apologize. Ms. Fonseca, is that accurate? Is that a fairly accurate description?
So, I mean, if that's the way it is, because the way she presented it, it's kind of like the contract was automatically extended without any funding to begin with. See my point? Like, you're extending a contract with no money, which...
No, Mr. Chairman, it would be that the vendor would be qualified for continuation in the overall program in a new funding year, predicated upon what that funding matrix would be, but the vendor would have already proven their worth to the program and would have been...
I think that's what they were trying to do, right?
Would therefore not need to be solicited, vetted,
Correct.
RFP'd, and would have already been met a minimum qualification standard, is what I'm saying.
Okay, all right. So that's kind of how they played it out.
Yes,
Hopefully
and
that's the way.
I will also
Please,
say
what's
that
up?
all of our contracts. Oops.
Just 1 second, 1 second.
Yep, sorry.
City Solicitor, can you just get that confirmed for us, okay? That's all. Mr. Severini?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Fonseca, of course, you have the mic, you want to say, ma'am?
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also just wanted to note that all of our contracts do have language that says contingent upon city council and budget approval as well.
That is correct. That is correct.
All right, so the follow-up question is the value. Is the program, internal audit, can you help me with that? What exactly is the number? Is it 567, 628, or is it another number? Can you please explain?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the award that is before you is for multiple vendors at the cost of $567. The other vendors have already been approved by the Board of Contract and Supply. However, since the COVID, there's been a reduction in the award, so this award needs to be amended to be $498,131.73.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Do you need a motion, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, for the internal audit, committee member, can we have a motion to amend
So
the
moved.
number from 567 to 628.33 to 498.131.73? By Councilman Anthony. Second, do I have a second?
Second.
Councilman Taylor, discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Sorry, Chairman.
Okay, great.
Which number is that?
The number for the internal audit is,
On the spreadsheet, is that?
I don't know, the number she gave me is 498.131.73. Okay, great, all right, okay.
And Mr. Chair, one more comment,
Yes,
please? And this is just for proper order. The other contracts that have already been awarded, that was a total of 257, went to 212. They've already been awarded, but because their contract amount has changed, I strongly recommend that they go back to the board and just do that adjustment.
Great, all right. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Right, reflected President Montos is present, all right. Thank you. And any other questions from any members? Council members, all right. So, I think other than just getting that language cleared up, Mr. Sherry, just verifying that process so everybody follows the rule of law, I think would be good, right? All right, then we have a motion to,
I'd like to make a motion to,
as amended.
as amended, please.
Councilman Anthony, second.
Second.
Councilman Taylor, discussion? Oh, I was just wondering, one of the folks actually called up and said, are we going to be using this money to buy computers and laptops and stuff for the children?
Yes, that is correct.
Will the laptop and stuff stay with the child and own it, or will the program keep it and use it for future use?
So the programs, like the nonprofit organizations, will keep those because they do also run year-long programs as well through our summer jobs program. Some of those organizations will be running potentially summer jobs programs as well.
So they're gonna use a portion of the money to buy computers and laptops and stuff for the children for this program, and then those nonprofits they're gonna get to keep all the equipment, all the computer equipment, correct?
That is the way that we have structured it, yes.
And you guys do a normal audit of it to make sure that the equipment is purchased and what kind of equipment, and in the past, not with these organizations, but other organizations where they don't necessarily use the money for what intended.
Yeah, so we do require that all the organizations are running this program on a reimbursement model, and we do require all receipts and backup documentation citing back the line items that they're referencing. So our team does go through and review those receipts before those organizations are reimbursed.
Great. Could you forward that information to the internal auditor so she can just, get another fresh pair of eyes on it, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Just follow up, all right? All right, with that, all in favor of the motion? Aye?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Fonseca, Ms. Perdomo. Be well and be safe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Last, we have item number 6 on the docket, Madam Clerk.
Discussion relative to the following. A, financial and update. B, school.
Yes.
Jordan Day also, it looks like, there. Emmanuel Echevara. No. Who else is going to testify on this?
Mr. Chairman, it would be myself, I believe Mr. Echavaria and Ms. Day, as the case may require. I will be happy to begin the testimony by giving a broad and as specific as I can overview of city finances, particularly as we closed out fiscal year 20 and now that we have started fiscal year 21.
So before we do that, can we have the witnesses sworn, Mr. Clerk?
Could you all please raise your right hand and swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Jay, say yes.
Please say yes and affirmative.
We can't hear him. Nope.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Aaron.
Echevarria, you hear me?
Jordan Day, Senior Deputy Chief Operating Officer for the City of Providence.
Mr. Echevarria?
I do. Emmanuel Echevarria, Director of Human Resources.
All right, thank you. So before you begin testimony, Ms. Mancini, is there a handout or something to show us where all this money is, what's been doing specifically? Do you have anything to give to the committee, to the council, and to the people of Providence?
Mr. Chairman, since our last scheduled appearance, we were able to file on Monday the timely filed report that was due to the state for both the quarter and now year end. And that version that was filed with the City Council, Internal Auditor, and Treasurer on Monday. So my report this evening is really a reflection of that activity, which will in fact be the official record preliminarily, and of course unaudited as we continue through the 60-day period that will end August 31st before we give unaudited trial balances to the outside auditors. So I'm actually working and reading from that report, and I'm providing information where I can expand upon that report, sir. So that was.
The committee and the council and the public at a disadvantage at this time. We don't have anything before the actual committee, so I'd ask you to, unfortunately, you're going to have to be very succinct, and because the issue we have, of course, is that we're at a disadvantage. And so first, why don't we start at the beginning? Tell us first how much money the city council approved for school buildings and when that happened. I'm going to take some steps first so we get some background first. So
okay.
How much money right now is there out there?
So Mr. Chairman, I want to be clear. I was expected to give testimony this evening on a wide array of financial information, and I thought the process would be best served if I talked about, first and foremost, how did the general fund end the city's fiscal year 20 at June 30? And then we would talk about current standing of city conditions, including the city's current tax position and how we're managing city affairs without a budget appropriation as yet, but a tax levy in place. And then I thought I would defer to my colleagues, Ms. Day, with respect to the school bonding and school construction numbers. So if you have no objection, Mr. Chairman, I would like to give that report, and then we can talk deeper about bonding and school construction. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, members of the council, this past Monday, just yesterday, we filed the report that was due to the state of Rhode Island. It's due the 25th of the month. That pushed it to Monday. And we filed a similar version with the city council, internal auditor, and city treasurer. At this time, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we are projecting that we will finish the year in a balanced budget position, which will include several important points. We'll finish the year in a balanced budget position, which is a tremendous change and a significant confidence since the fourth quarter began roughly around April 1 as we went through the fourth quarter tax collection. You may recall in testimony provided during that period that there were concerns about softness of tax collections, whether or not we would in fact receive the entirety of our tax levy, and whether or not by offering taxpayers the opportunity to remain current by paying beyond the due date of April 24th. I'm pleased to say, starting in that category, Mr. Chairman, that taxpayers not only responded favorably, but we in fact collected not only dollar for dollar on the amount that was levied, but we actually collected 50 basis points or 0.5% greater, approximately 1.7 million greater in current taxes, which speaks to the integrity of the taxpayer, and it also speaks to the soundness of the city's collection practices. So we're going to finish the year, Mr. Chairman, at this time under a balanced budget position, and we expect to make the entire payment to the city's rainy day fund, approximately $3.9 million. Once again, during the discussions held by the Finance Committee during April and May, there was some uncertainty whether that would be achieved and could be achieved. It depended upon how we finished the year in a balanced position or not. Many things have led to the changes, Mr. Chairman, as we closed out the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter saw some record losses in revenue that came from outside and third-party and independent pass-through sources. As an example, those sources that were made up of what we would consider revenues that are affected by human behavior and by the COVID-19 conditions and restrictions, which included hotel tax, meal and beverage taxes, parking revenue, speed zone camera revenue because the schools were not operating, and therefore the schools by state statute, or the cameras rather, cannot operate when the school is not in session. And there was a significant diminishment of municipal court revenue because still to this day, 60% of all municipal court revenue is paid as in-person revenue versus online or over some of the methodology. So we saw in total, Mr. Chairman, about $5.7 million in revenue reductions for the year, but the bulk of that was generated through the fourth quarter, the 13 weeks or so from approximately the middle of March right to the end of June. And they were in areas that we expected. We had projected and informed this committee and members of the council regularly and steadily that we would see that kind of reduction. In fact, at one time, we thought it would be greater. At one time, we thought there would be a larger lag in taxes. While not deficient, we thought we would see it more likely in July as a back tax. So I'm proud to say, Mr. Chairman, that while we finished with $5.7 million less revenue than what was budgeted, we were also able to make equal and appropriate amounts of budget reductions on the expenditure side, including salary savings that total $1.4 million, of which of that $1.4 million, $461,000 came from 1 month of work share, or approximately 2 pay periods. Mr. Echevarria will talk about that program and its success as we move into the fiscal year. But for at least the 2 pay periods that were initiated in the month of June, there was a $461,000 salary savings. In addition to that, Mr. Chairman, we saw once again another year of savings in the medical account, nearly $500,000 in the active medical insurance and $2.2 million savings in retiree medical. We also saw savings in operations across public safety, $606,000. We saw savings in debt service of $681,000 based on some additional credits. We saw savings in operations at Public Works, predominantly due to better weather and about $1 million savings in the snow budget. Taken together, those savings were equal to the loss in revenue. So we finished the year at this time in a balanced budget position. Bear in mind, Mr. Chairman, we still have to complete the 60-day process, both for revenues and those expenditures that require proper accrual. On the revenue side, Mr. Chairman, the largest and most leading component of revenue that is recognized during the 60-day period is known as back taxes. This year, very unique. I can't recall an instance in my time when a tax sale occurred after the fiscal year, but because of the delay and the continuation of the tax sale that was not held on May 14th, it was rescheduled for August 26th. It was decided that it would happen before the 60-day period ended on August 31st. So any revenues received in that period will be in fact included in the back tax budget calculation. And we expect still that that'll generate upwards of $1.8 to $2 million in additional revenue, which will satisfactorily bring us to a balanced budget in the back tax category. In addition, there are...
Did the state make their final payments in the quarter?
When you say final payments, I'm not quite sure I understand.
Weren't there some payments the state had to make in the final quarter? Were there any payments due? I'll do it the opposite way. Were there any, did the state owe the city any money in the last quarter? If so, how much, and was it paid?
State paid us the last of our distressed cities, and they paid us the Public Service Corporation tax, known as the telephone tax, but they was received in the month of July. What has not yet been received...
Give me 100% of it? Give me 100% though?
100%, that's correct. What has not yet been received, Mr. Chairman, is the outstanding pilot appropriation, which is generally paid in the month of July, once the General Assembly adopts their budget, generally in the month of June. So with the General Assembly not yet ready to take up their budget, as I understand it, more likely in the month of August. And as I understand further, they're waiting on what will happen, I hope, this week in Congress, as we move into the first week in August. But much of the work of the General Assembly will probably more likely be governed by the work that happens in Congress. So the balanced budget position that we project, Mr. Chairman, in sincerity, is predicated on us receiving what was expected in the pilot allocation, some $33 million.
Mr. Mancini, so how much is that pilot amount?
$33,497,000.
$33 million. So we haven't received our $33 million yet, right? Of the
That is
pilot
correct.
budget.
That is correct.
The balanced budget is based on money that we haven't received yet, but we hope we get, right? So right now we still have so we have an IOU of $33 million to the state.
While I won't call it an IOU because it's never assured and it's subject to appropriation by the General Assembly, for all the years that we have managed pilot in a post-year end, we have always counted the year
Pre
back.
and post-COVID now, we know the General Assembly. Next question is, did we get...
It is possible.
Colleges and universities, do they have any payments that they owed us in that last fiscal year? And if so, how much?
For the most part, we have received just about all of those receivables. We are still working with two of the universities, actually two of the entities.
Which ones? Two universities?
It's Rhode Island School of Design, and we're working with Lifespan on the ability to collect on both of those. We have not dismissed them as uncollectible. We're just waiting a little bit longer to see how the next 30 days or so will work out.
How much money is that right now?
What was expected was $400,000 from Lifespan, and I believe, Ms. Lindberg, do you know the amount for RISD, what that amount is? Is it under $500,000? You know?
So is it 1.4?
You're on mute.
Sorry.
How much is,
I actually haven't been sworn in yet. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Should I probably
Can
do
we
that?
swear in Ms. Lindberg, please?
Swear, Ms. Lindberg?
Please raise your hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Say your name and title for the record.
Crystal Lindberg, Deputy Finance Director.
So, Ms. Lindberg, is it about, how much is RISD? Is it about a million?
290. I show that RISD for fiscal 20, it was about 290,000.
290,000.
$290,000 for the 2012 agreement. Hold on one moment. Let me just add these two amounts together. $488,000 in total for the two pilot agreements.
So RISD is late on another payment and then late with this payment right now, right? The past fiscal year, you said? Is that right?
There are two
Well,
agreements, Chairman. There are two agreements, and they're treated as one payment.
And that one payment would be 488,000?
That's correct.
488,921. Yes.
404 from Lifespan, is that correct?
400.
Okay, 400? All right. So right now, Mr. Mancini, I know you stated on paper, right now, the city claims it has a balanced budget based on that the state will hopefully pay us the $33 million they still owe us.
That's correct.
Also, RISD pays their 488, and Lifespan pays their 400.
That is correct.
So when the General Assembly comes back and passes their budget finally, so let's take a step back. That $33 million the General Assembly owes us actually is owed to the previous fiscal year, so they should have had that money, right? So
it is, in my opinion, yes, but it's not able to be dispersed until the appropriation for
they don't have the money.
For the forward year.
Right, they don't have the money. So right now, on paper it says it, but right now the city actually has a deficit the city ended in a deficit position until those payments come in. It actually ended in a deficit last fiscal year with about approximately $35 million, $34 million, $35 million. If that money comes in, then it becomes a true balanced budget. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would state another way. Until I know different, until I've been put on notice that I will not receive the pilot money, let's start with pilot, I have an obligation to my work and that of the city to report what I had expected in the budget that was submitted and adopted by the city for FY20. You have heard me say this on multiple occasions in testimony that I do not know how the outcome will be in the General Assembly's adopted, but bear in mind, it does have impact not only in the prior year, but in the year going forward. The budget that they're about to adopt is for FY21. I have no choice but to expect what was included in our budget until I learn different. I have not heard different in any conversations either at the administration or at the legislative level. As to the others, we are in pursuit of those, and while I don't have any direct knowledge that they will not be paid, certainly if they're not, they will lead to a reduction in the budget balance position, and I would hope that we could make that up in some other category. There are some things that still have not been fully adjusted, Mr. Chairman. They include such things as the legal accrual, the so-called 60-day revenue, other aspects of pension interest accrual for pension savings that have yet to be reconciled. But as we stood with our records as of June 30, with a 25-day later reporting period, again, these are preliminary and unaudited, but they do represent quality representation.
I appreciate it, Mr. Mancini. I just want to make sure that my colleagues on the committee and also my other colleagues.
I understand that.
That I want to make sure they understand what the present situation is. Are there other outstanding monies that are in the last fiscal year that I know you acknowledge, you said in good faith to say the goal is hopefully we do receive it and therefore we'll equal a balanced budget. So far from the last fiscal year, we still have, and I'm viewing it this way, an IOU of $33 million from the state, about $488,000 from RISD, $400,000 from Lifespan. Any other college or universities or hospitals owe us any money at this time also?
No.
Any other entity owes us any money?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. All right. So then if all those events happen, then we could then officially potentially close the book or the books on the last fiscal year, right?
We will when we'd have to complete the tax sale, which is held this year, post year end. So that's going to be part of the so-called 60-day revenue and will assist us in our best efforts. And I believe we'll complete the balanced budget of back taxes. I'm almost assured that we will do that. And then
how much do we expect in the tax sale? How much do we expect in the tax sale?
Probably between 1.8 million and 2.2 million.
All right. Okay. And in the municipal court, right now, because, as you mentioned, with 61% of municipal court revenue is based on in-person paying, correct?
That is,
Now, so-
on average, that's correct. That is correct.
So in theory, although the city's basically shut down, there is no parking revenue right now. It's a ghost town down here, right? Right, there's nothing happening. So, but the months of, I guess, April, May, June, July, although it was shut down, when people come into municipal court, right, those tickets were for the previous month pre-COVID. So,
That's correct.
is there a backlog of money owed to the city, not based on tickets issued during the shutdown, but tickets
That's
issued
correct.
pre-shutdown that eventually, if we can figure out how to either have them paid in person, otherwise, do we know what that number is?
No, so Mr. Chairman, it's a very good question, and it's a good point that we don't discuss often, but that was one of the reasons why years ago we lobbied for that type of revenue to be included in the 60-day revenue count. So those of us who handle accounting daily, these are revenues that lag naturally because of the way they're collected. As example, the state always pays 2 months in arrears on meals and beverage and hotel. Regardless of what that amount is, what you collect in August was really for the last month of June in the prior year. Similarly to your point about red light cameras, speeding tickets, all those tickets, whatever ticket was physically issued pre-June 30, and we are able to collect during the 60 days subsequent, will be included and can be reflected and carried back to the prior year. So while we don't know that number yet,
Do we have an outstanding number?
the controller's office is working daily with municipal court and closing out books and records and closing out accounts, but we're not fully yet completed, but they're doing daily book and bank reconciliation. So we don't have that number completely, but they are working through it.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Colonel, do you have any follow-up questions, Treasurer?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the payments, the voluntary payments.
Sure, go ahead. Go.
Okay, just for clarification, according to the report, the city is shy about $1.4 million total, and I know Lifespan 400 and RISD 488, there's still someone else missing there. Providence Place Mall, they only paid $500, they owe $970,000, so there's $470 shortfall there.
Yep.
You're assuming they're okay to pay?
Yes, I have had direct conversation with representatives of Providence Place Mall. We're just waiting to certify the final cost of living increase that the contract calls for, and that payment will produce not only what was budgeted, but a bit higher. So that payment will be paid nearly immediately once we sign off on the calculation for the cost of living change in that payment. It's expected to be, I believe, closer to $497,000 remaining on Providence Place Mall. Yes.
Okay.
Cheverini, solicitor, I know Councilman, I think Salvatore brought up a law statute about the city, and I'm paraphrasing, if damage occurs to somebody's property for the city's failure to protect it of some sort, the city would end up reimbursing them or pay them. Does the city fail to protect the Providence Place Mall during the riot that occurred in the city? Has there been any type of claim filed with the city for any value for the damages to the mall, Mr. Cheverini?
I'm not familiar with that ordinance or that statute, but I will look at it and provide you with a response at the next meeting.
Thank you. Just curious. All right, thank you. Let the record reflect that Deputy Majority Leader Harris is present. Ms. Massini, any other follow-up, internal orders?
Yes.
Just one small comment. The tickets are required to be paid in 14 days, so I don't know how that would fall into 60-day revenue. I don't know if that's the reason. I'm just commenting that tickets are due in 14 days. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Massini, continue, sir.
No, I was providing you with responses to the internal auditor's question on Providence Place Mall and the other tax-exempt institutions. In some cases, when we do the final tax reconciliation, what we call additional transfer parcels have been incorporated or included in taxes and should be included in that line item. So when they complete that reconciliation over the next 31 days, Mr. Chairman, we'll have a more accurate report.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. You can continue, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman, that tends to round out reporting at year end, and I want to again emphasize that it is preliminary and it certainly is unaudited. But we were and we must file with the state within 25 days of year end, and likewise we file a companion report with the city council. We have kept the state abreast of our affairs. In fact, today was the regular scheduled meeting of our finance team officials with state officials, which include the Auditor General, Division of Municipal Finance, and Department of Revenue. We were joined today by the council.
Is the internal audit involved in that?
Well, today, Mr. Chairman, we were joined by your outside representative, Mr. Almonte, joined us on that call, and I believe he's available for discussion. But I think he would say that we've shared as complete and as fair information as we could share on all matters affecting the city of Providence, not just balance the budget. With that, as we move into FY21, Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to say that we are operating under continuing authority with restrictions associated with only those mandatory essential payments that must be made. Departments have been planning for that over the past 2 months, for the period at minimally of July and August, or until we know when there's going to be a state adopted budget, which will then plan for the city's ultimately appropriation adoption. Mr. Chairman, that may well be September, particularly in light of the council, with the General Assembly not meeting until I think August, and if the council does not meet beyond their traditional August recess. But with that, I will say that tax bills, while they did go out,
the Finance Committee will continue to meet, so we'll be working on that budget during the month of August.
I'm looking forward to that, Mr. Chairman.
Providence and the council members
Mr. Chairman,
working in
Mr.
earnest.
Chairman, with the highest degree of respect, sir, and sincerity, I'm looking forward to that. In doing the city's business. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to say that while there's been some consternation and concern about the timing of the tax bills, I want to report to the committee that yes, while I know you've heard from constituents and you have heard some complaint that they arrived later than they should have, I do want you to know that the administration took immediate action, and we have announced that we will accept bill payment right through Friday, August 14th, with no impact, no penalty, no interest additional charge to any city taxpayer on any city bill. It was expected that we would do that right through the end of July, Mr. Chairman, based on council resolution, and we generally go into the first week of the following month, which would have been the date of August 7th. We extended by another week to accommodate that. And Mr. Chairman, there were a number of reasons that led to that, and most notably, it wasn't because of the June 30 second passage of the levy. We expected that. But the printer puts us in a position where they can print for just about, I think, 2/3 of the municipalities in the state of Rhode Island. And when you lose your place in that line, to get back into the line, it has to be done with assurance. So we couldn't give them the next assurance date until there was second passage. With that fell in the short week of the July 4th holiday on Friday, and then there were subsequent employee vacations at the printer. With all due respect, they did work through the holiday vacation week, and they produced bills daily in batches that got out. Finally, they were all able to get out into the mail and postmarked properly, I believe, by July 10th on a Friday, and then the final batch on Monday, July 13th. With that said, Mr. Chairman, normally the first quarter collection spread between July and August generally results in 33% on average of the entire tax levy. On a $333 million tax levy for the new year, that would approximate $109 million of revenue collection. I'm pleased to say that through the first 3.5 weeks of July, right through this past Friday and Monday, we've already collected close to $65 million in taxes. And today, based on a reconciliation of cash provided by the City Controller's Office and my Deputy Finance Director, there is $65 million in cash today sitting in the bank, enabling us to properly plan conservatively how we will get through the months of July, August, and until we have an adopted appropriation on the city side. So I take comfort in that, and that there is sufficiency of cash to meet our obligations. Again, minimum, mandatory, essential obligations only. Those things that would result in either contract default for the default conditions of the city. We have covered all of our debt service. Yes, sir.
Just a note, I wouldn't ask because I know prior, the past couple of months, the committee's met several times, and we told numerous directors about, I guess they had open positions that they were looking to fund, and do we have, and I'm hearing statements that the city's still hiring and filling positions, and I'd like to get a sense of what positions have you hired, who, what, when, how, considering that that would be financially responsible. And I know the directors seem to, I don't know if they understood what we were saying to them. I thought we were pretty explicit last 3-4 months of budget negotiation, of budget discussions, but I'm hearing that directors are still moving ahead and they're filling positions. And if that's the case, I'd like to know, and then if so, then what are they, what positions, et cetera, specifically?
So, Mr. Chairman, if you would give me a chance to answer you directly, but I also have with me my colleague, Director Echevarria, the Human Resources Director. Let me make this emphatically clear, including, again, just last Thursday and Friday, Director Echevarria, myself, and the finance directors sent out another memorandum to all department directors and their fiscal agents and officials on only essential spending, only those positions that must be filled because of a mandatory requirement will in fact be considered. There has not been, to my knowledge, hiring beyond minimally essential required positions. There have been vacancies that have not been addressed because of the COVID-19 restriction that was placed on the administration, and we have heard from the city council, and we have honored that understanding. I would, at this time, if you allow me, Mr. Chairman, defer to Mr. Echevarria, and he can give direct testimony on that, if he would be happy to do so.
Yeah,
Chairman, if I may.
So we have issued, good afternoon, good evening, rather. We have issued guidance to department heads stating that only essential or mission critical positions will be filled. That guidance also comes with a process where a director can make a case for the essentiality of the position, and that gets reviewed by myself. There are also supplemental questions that we provide. If you look at the city website, we only have 3 permanent positions posted right now, and only 2 of them are in the general fund, and there's a temporary position for a health screener. The positions that we've hired, they haven't been many in the period since March. I'm happy to provide your staff a list of what positions we have posted, what positions we have hired, and who staffed those positions, so that you can also review that data. I can't recount them all off the top of my head, but I know we've had some in the city clerk's office because those are essential functions of government. I believe we had one or a few in telecommunications, so for 911 operations or for our public safety operations, and very limited.
Did you since there is no funding, the ones that were expired because the grant expired, those folks, those positions would have been eliminated automatically. Have they been eliminated, or is the city still paying these positions that were based on grants?
I'm sorry, you cut off a little bit for me when you started your question.
There are numerous positions in the city government that are grant-based, grant-funded. And part of the city law is that when the grant expires, the position expires. Since the grant has expired in some of these positions, is the city still paying now without a grant? Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, the position eliminated automatically because it's no longer in the budget, it's no longer been funded. So are those positions still existing? And if so, which ones, and how are you funding them if by law they have to be funded by a grant?
That's not information I have off the top of my head, but my assumption would be that if it's not funded and we don't have grant funds available, that we wouldn't have the position. I'm happy to look into that and provide you a detailed report.
Are there any positions that the folks fill that's in the mayor's submitted proposed budget, but which has not been approved? And if so, which ones?
So just to make sure that I'm clear on your question, you're asking if in the fiscal year 2021 submitted proposed budget, if any
Not
of them
approved.
are being posted?
You have to have about $6.5 million worth of new positions and new jobs. None of those positions should be filled. So my question is, have you filled those positions? If so, how did you have the legal authority to do it when you don't have the legal authority to do it? And then if you don't, you need to immediately follow the law. And unfortunately, as I said before, past months, that and the directors know that if you decide to unilaterally hire somebody based on a position that may or may not be there in the future, well, it's on you, because that was an illegal action. So I want to know if, I want you to be able to go to those positions and ask the internal auditor to double check that, those positions, the grant positions, and if you don't know, then you need to find out, and then put them all on notice, and then let those department heads, if they're violating the city law, and they need to comply, or, in my mind, director of HR, you then have to begin the process for discipline actions. That's how that works, right? I mean, when a city employee is breaking the law, do you keep the city employee, or do you apply a disciplinary action against an employee? Director.
Well,
if a city employee is breaking the city law, do you reward them, or do you discipline them?
We do not reward employees, no, not for breaking.
Discipline, right? So the committee and I and the financial team has put the city on notice for months upon months. So, on audit, I need you to kind of audit that aspect with this director here, and let's get to the bottom of that. Before what happens is the traditional that they pull the heartstrings and then they force us to own positions that they illegally hired. And then meanwhile, the taxpayer has to suffer, and they're suffering enough out there. That's what I'd like to. All right. So, and then Treasurer, you can help out with that matter too. So do you want to give us your, with the present financial, you give us financial look-see, Mr. Mancini?
Mr. Chairman, that about rounds out much of what I had to comment this evening based on FY20, and I wanted to just give the committee certainly the comfort of knowing that we are sufficiently cash positioned to meet those obligations that we have deemed only essential, be it wages and attendant benefits, along with the minimally required operational expenses, whether that's fuel for vehicles, heat, light, and power, and those such things that are definitely necessary. Finance department has worked with all departments to ensure that they have submitted their planned cash expenditures by fund, by object code. I'm satisfied that that job was done well. We have held well through the month of July. We will continue through August, if necessary, through September, or until there is an adopted city budget.
Mancini, month of July is pretty much behind us right now. Yep. And I guess presently right now, is Mr. Paradas online, parking tickets, and what's the stat? I presume that it can't be much this past month of July. Do you have that?
I don't specifically, but let me check with him. He did report to us that he was seeing a pickup of parking revenue. I know that may seem odd, but he did see it from a low that went down to nearly 20,000 a month. So I think it was starting to demonstrate that we might, if I recall and recollect his conversation with the finance team, we might, despite that diminishment in the fourth quarter and what might be similar in the first quarter because of human behavior and COVID restrictions, he still feels confident that we could have a pickup that would assist us through the FY21. Let me allow him to give me that information, and we'll report back to the committee, or we'll give it to the internal auditor. But I do think he thinks we can still do well in FY21 to salvage any budget break.
Okay. Questions by committee members on this? Well, Mr. Mancini, continue. I guess what you want to go into school borrowing, Mr. Mancini?
Yeah, so I'm going to, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to give a brief overview that I shared with the treasurer and the internal auditor. and it's meant to, it was meant to give them some idea of the present standing of school bond borrowing authority and where we would be with that. And I know there's been conversation with counselors, and while it's not on tonight's docket, discussion associated how the next round of borrowing and the appropriate and necessary authority would have to occur in order for that to be successful. So, Mr. Chairman, if you will permit me just a 5-minute tour of that. You may recall 2 years ago, this council and this committee bestowed upon the city the right and the benefit to put on the ballot $160 million of bond borrowing authority. The voters overwhelmingly approved that on an 8-to-1 margin. So as we moved through the approval process of what was then new to every community in Rhode Island, stage 1, stage 2, RIDE borrowing, we were approved for $278 million of a submitted application that was closer to $310 million. In that process, the former director of public property, Director Borg, had worked closely with RIDE and had developed plans that would have implemented basically that $278 million plan. It was expected that 128 of that finally would be used for warm, safe, and dry. The other 150 million would be associated with whatever projects was deemed appropriate and necessary to pursue. Since last November 1, the date of the RIDE intervention and turnaround plan, there had been a delay or at least a step back in a review of that plan that had already been developed. Ms. Day has worked steadily, as have not only myself and members of the finance team, but even members of the city council. Treasurer Lombardi has attended a multitude of meetings in the early stages of that turnaround activity, and we participated in discussions associated with how next best would we spend $278 million of public funds when and if we did take down the borrowing. Along the way, there were certain pivot points that changed. RIDE and the School Building Authority had an excess amount of their own cash that they had borrowed under the governor's $500 million bonding authority 2 years earlier, and they wanted to distribute that cash to communities under the so-called pay-go method. And under pay-go, you utilize the same reimbursement percentages, therefore the same contribution percentage as your community prevails. So in Providence, that would mean 82% state share, 18% city share. So for every pay-go invoice, we would actually pay either on an 18% pari per sue, or if we have the cash, we pay it in full and get 82 cents back on the dollar under pay-go. And there were a number of projects that were identified as pay-go worthy, shovel-ready, and ready to go. Again, further delays in design, as well as policy, as well as vision on the part of RIDE. There was a new commissioner. She had done several meetings throughout the community, and there were new studies that were done, and of course, a new administration at the school district.
So, Mr. Mancini, is there presently now potentially $310 million that the city can utilize to refurbish their school buildings? Is that available right now?
There is $160 million of bonding authority that we have not drawn against yet. Of that 160, 50 of it would be associated with pay-go. So true bonding would be about $110 million. And then we have the new potential to draw down an additional $140 million of bonding authority, subject to council approval of a resolution.
No. Don't talk about, I don't want to get to what.
Okay.
You guys,
yes.
I want to talk about right now, as we speak today, real time. There was $160
million of authority. We have authority for $160 million, and we are positioned anytime post July 1 to borrow between 100 and 120 million, should we decide that fits the new criteria of projects, and we would not begin repayment on that bonding until a year later. So that was always the plan.
That's a potential new bond, right? The 100 million?
That's a potential new bond, okay, but under the existing authority granted by the voters 2 years ago.
But right now, it's 160 million.
Of bonding authority, right, of which we will borrow.
The voters approved $160 million worth of bonding authority 2 years ago. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's where we are right now. Is there any matching money from the state of Rhode Island?
Yes.
There would be if we decided to take that down as pay-go, and on the pay-go, they would put up approximately $15 million. We would have to put up $10 million in match.
Okay, so we get another 50 million from the state, is this what you're saying?
50 million would be pay-go, and that would leave 110 million of authority as a bond borrowing under borrowing standards. The reason why it's pay-go is
So we put 50 million of that 160, and the state would give us how much more? For the 10?
We would get 82% of the amount that we're entitled to minimally, and then depending upon what projects are authorized, there could be incentive bonus points ranging from 5% additional to 9% additional. Ms. Day can speak
I kind of feel like I'm at the casino with the pay to go and incentive points, and I'm looking for everybody to have those cards, and I'm going to get a free sandwich. My question is, right now we got 160 mil. What have we done with the 160 mil right now? Have we spent any of it? Have we applied anything? Any shovels in the ground? Have we scoped any work out? So let's start with that first before what have we done?
We haven't gone against that authority yet, but
so right now we got 160. It's still sitting there. We haven't drawn down on it, right?
If I may,
I'm going to defer.
Do we have plans for the 160?
Yes.
I'm being demonstrative on purpose. The 160 in the account is sitting there. I know we got the pay-go thing that Mr. Anthony mentioned. I get all that. I presume we have a plan to spend the 160 in the pay-go. Where's that plan? First of all, do we have a plan?
So, sir, we do have a plan.
Okay, where is the plan? Where is the plan?
So I don't have a document that I had shared previously just as a preview, and I did not share it with the body today, so I apologize in advance. But I'm happy to share the documentation following this meeting. So I just want to clarify.
So we do have a plan. But we don't have it before the committee right now. We don't know what it is yet. You don't have it finalized. It's still in draft.
So it is near final. There are some minor edits that need to happen in the next day or so, and they're very small changes. So I want to just pivot back to the question about the 160. So there's $160 million that the city got voter approval for in 2018. In our Stage 2 submission, we submitted to the state for a portion of our overall capital plan at approximately $310 million, which we originally submitted, a plan to get potential pay-go funds that would be deduced from the overall $160 million. We were approved somewhere between $48 and $49 million worth of pay-go funds, which comes out of the state's $250 million bond approval for school capital plans that is unrelated to the cities. However, that $48 million is reduced from our total $150 million capacity to borrow, which is where Chief Mancini references borrowing up to $110 million. At this time,
although right now we got 160, the plan is only going to borrow 110 now, right?
Correct.
In bond borrowing, that is correct.
In bond borrowing. What other borrowing are we talking about then? Any other borrowing?
So pay-go is state funds, and so that would be the state's those are state bonds, state responsibility for paying those funds back.
The state has approved to give us that money?
Yes, we received approval in May of 2019 for between $48 and $49 million worth of pay-go funds.
Okay. So do you have the breakdown of what the state approved for us to use that money for?
So they originally approved our 2019 MOA to outline $278 million worth of capital work, and that is a public document, which I'm happy to share with the body.
I'm fine with that. But my question is, so did they give us the money and said, you only get $50 million or so from the state? You can choose between all those types of projects, or did the city say to the state, these are the projects out of that laundry list we are going to do? Which is it?
We defined the projects that would be included in the 2019 MOA.
So can you put together what projects specifically that you city plans on funding out of that big $290 million MOA. That's the big public document, that's the hopeful list. What exactly are we doing with that? Okay, do we have that breakdown yet?
So I want to talk more because this is a work in progress and there are changes that are in discussion. I just want to note that
it's not a complete.
We do have a
document.
breakdown.
You have a breakdown, but it's not ready yet. Not ready for public consumption yet?
I think I could tell you some examples of projects
Hang on.
totaling up to
I'd rather you have, when will the proposed final product be ready? So then you can give it to the committee and the council, so we can all understand what we're doing with that. When will we get that?
So,
Let's do that timeline first.
If I would be authorized, I'm comfortable sharing my screen. I don't know if I have the authority to do that.
So I don't want to get you into trouble, and then Emmanuel will have to discipline you. So let's do this.
I don't necessarily think that
could you just, all I care about is when will that be ready, and when can you share with the internal auditor, the treasurer, and then eventually to the council?
the list has already been shared with the treasurer and the auditor, so I'm comfortable presenting it before this body if I would be allowed to do so digitally.
Okay, so before you do that, now this is going to be about what the pay go, as you call it. What's going to do with that money?
This would be about what the 160 million that we are currently approved for. It would potentially be allocated to pending the school building authority's approval of our proposed amendment that we are in discussions with RIDE and the district on at this time.
Okay. I'm going to take one question from the treasurer, and if it's a quick question, I just want to make sure we stay on this momentum. Mr. Treasurer, did you have a question for Ms. Day or Mr. Mancini?
Yeah, I just want to ask you to share what you shared with us the other day. If you want the council to take a vote, I think that you need to explain this and what the new funds are going to be. I'm just trying to.
Well, I don't want to get to the new funding yet until we know.
Friday.
I don't want to get to new funding yet until we know what
That's
we're
what I'm
doing
saying.
with the 160. I mean, let's try to figure what we're doing with the money we have before we say give you even more. So, or ask the people to give you more, right? You know, Ms. Day, can you tell us right now what we plan on doing with the 160 mil, or how you break it down?
Yes, I'm happy to.
Sure, go ahead.
So work for all of our facilities is broken down into 7 major categories. Those categories include mechanical, electrical, and plumbing maintenance, structural repairs, building envelope improvements, fire code improvements, secure and accessible entrances, high-impact enhancement projects, and student-centric innovations. I would say the first 4 categories that I had previously stated, those typically are identified by folks working in capital projects as warm, safe, or dry categories of work. So this is roof issues, these are HVAC systems. That is what that work is oriented towards. It's updating sprinkler systems and fire alarm systems. That is the general idea there. The other 3 categories are pretty self-explanatory. So secure and accessible entrances, improving ADA accessibility and increasing security measures at our schools. High-impact visual enhancements are aesthetic enhancements at facilities. So that would include paint, floors, new fixtures. Furniture could be included in that if it's part of a broader project, as well as student-centric innovations are projects that are oriented towards the student learning experience. One school, as an example, that has lots of student-centric spaces is PCTA. And for folks who were on the council when PCTA was built, you'll probably recall that this is one of the first schools of its kind to really embrace the 21st century learning model. And so, as an example, they have a cafe where you can buy goods, but it's also an area where
We lost your audio. Ms. Day, we lost you. Ms. Day? We lost your audio. Mr. Clerk, is it on our side?
Now she does look muted. She must have acted.
We think you muted yourself. No?
No, I think she lost audio. Hey, if you can join using phone audio, maybe we can hear you and we can reconvene, or you can just rejoin the Zoom meeting.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. There was an issue with my phone, and so I don't know where I cut out.
Problem. So, you were talking about student innovation. You were talking about the cafeteria. You were talking
so
about what they can purchase there and what can do, and then you cut out.
Sorry about that. So that's an example of a student-centric space where students are not only participating in a learning environment, but they're also participating in an activity. A similar thing can happen if we expand, if there's a health-oriented learning program and we expand a nurse's space in order to allow for a learning environment as well as the care of our students. So those are examples of student-centric innovations.
So, Ms. Day, so the 160 million is to do all these types of elements. Is that correct?
Yes, at a variety of our facilities. So not every facility will touch all 7 categories. I will say predominantly we focus on all of the first 4 categories, things that fall under warm, safe, dry. And then we identified projects along the way that could incorporate the last 3 categories in order to do more holistic repairs. One example of that is at, I want to pull up a good example for you all, is Pleasant View Elementary School. So we are proposing investing over $12 million into that facility before December of 2022. The idea is that we would not only handle the mechanical issues, the structural issues, building envelope issues, and fire code, but we would also put about $2.9 million worth of investments into student-centric spaces, so the student-oriented learning spaces that I just had explained.
So, Ms. Day, do you have the actual breakdown of each school and each facility and what's going to happen to each one?
So I have the cumulative totals for every single facility that would be proposed as part of the 160 million that we are currently approved for. And the categories of work are broken down in a separate sheet, but I can provide that in a more detailed and concise document.
I think it would be helpful that the council members know, okay, like the 160 million, these are all the schools or the school facilities we're looking to touch or concern. This is what we're going to do at this school, that school, et cetera, et cetera. Are we doing anything for central offices? Are we spending money in that building?
That's not a space that can be included in the capital plan because it's not an educational facility. But that would be a facility that we could plan for future capital improvements in the city side capital improvement plan.
So when could we get the breakdown of the one each facility?
So again, I'm comfortable showing you our draft document this evening, just noting that it is subject to change.
Well, it seems to me it's pretty voluminous. There's a lot going on in it, right? So what I'd like to do is that I'm having a meeting on Thursday. So I'd like to invite you to come back on Thursday. And then could you please, prior to that, provide all that proposed breakdown to all the council members, committee members, just on Thursday, we can go through and see what you're saying versus trying to see on a Zoom screen. Would you do that for us?
I'm happy to do that, sir.
I think that'd be very beneficial. I think committee members, do you agree? Councilman Taylor, Councilman Anthony? Then we could just...
I have a question on that. I have a question. If it's Mr. Chair. So my understanding is there's a tight turnaround on so in order for.
Oh, no. Yeah, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the 160 we already gave them. I'm just looking to get the breakdown of that. We're not talking about the proposed next 100 million. We haven't got that yet.
That's fine. Thank you.
Well, so the question I'm proposing is to have her come back next Thursday to at least give us the breakdown of the 160 that we already gave them.
And then are we taking action on the rest of it tonight, or are we hearing that matter?
Oh, yeah, we're gonna talk about that, but
okay,
we're gonna talk
that's
about
fine.
that, but I haven't got there yet, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's sorry. Okay, thank you.
But the idea was we didn't want to. She had a screen. She was going to show the screen on the computer.
I understand. Okay.
Looking at $160 million of proposed expenditures, and I don't think that's an efficient use of all our time. At
I'm
this
fine
time.
with that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Well, I asked if she would be able to do that. Okay. Mr. Treasurer?
Ms. Day, if you could get us that sooner rather than later, I know that there's some council people who are waiting for that. So the sooner the better, if you don't mind, and then whatever the chairman wants you to do Thursday, of course.
I will stay up tonight and send it to you overnight.
Thank you.
That's to all council people.
So right now,
of course.
The president is $160 million. It was approved by the voters already. That's. Then you have this, the pay-go program with the state. You're looking to get another 50 mil, or how that plays out. You have a proposed breakdown of where you're going, where you'd like to spend the money in each school in those 9 categories, correct? In that you will provide that tonight and tomorrow to the internal audit treasurer, everybody, the committee and the council, the clerks, so we can discuss that in detail on Thursday, right?
Yes, of course.
So why don't we jump over now, because, so right now, no money has been spent yet, is that correct, on the 160?
So there have been funds that were allocated as part of the $20 million bond that are part of our pay-go approval. They were approved under the 2019 MOA, so we're working with the state on getting the reimbursement for that, and those are being processed at this time. I don't have the exact project off the top of my head, but I will share that with the body as well. In addition to that, we've begun design documentation on 6 roof projects throughout the city, and I can also provide that list. We've also begun the design phase for improvements at Classical High School and Pleasant View Elementary.
So you've spent some money so far, the 160 and the pay-go aspect, and you're going to be able to provide that to internal audit and the treasurer, so we can also discuss it on Thursday. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So I think that pretty much. Right now, we're still at the very beginning stages of spending this money. That's what it sounds like, right?
I would say we are at the beginning stages, because when the state turnaround initiative transpired and that developed last spring, we decided that we wanted to make sure that we were reviewing the plan that was in alignment with the state turnaround initiative, and working with the new superintendent, the new education commissioner, and looking at what the goals were of that plan in order to try to align our capital plans to go with that as well. So our capital plan has been reframed in a way that we're not only thinking more holistically about our facilities in order to identify opportunities for savings, but we're also looking at our facilities to ensure that they're aligning with the programmatic goals of the district. So that means moving towards more pre-K opportunities. Are we having more pre-K to 8 facilities throughout the district? Those are some of the things that we've been working on. And so the product that we're talking about is a result of all of those conversations that have been happening for the last few months, just to get a good understanding of where our facilities fall in line with the programmatic decisions that are being made.
Have we also taken consideration of now the new potential educational dynamics that's occurring, which is this, we call it at-home learning, where it seems that that's something that's actually probably not going to necessarily go away. So are we revisiting even how we even, have they revisited even the conversation of what we should even do with some of these schools? Because you may not be using them the same way they were using them pre-COVID. They're going to be using them in a different manner. Are they looking at this? So before we build, for example, I would hate for us to spend money to build the Model T that was pre-COVID. Now that we're going into the Tesla age, because what's happening with all this at-home learning, and it seems to be that's, should we be investing in, for example, broadband? Should we be investing in other, so the children have greater access? Because at-home learning seems to be going to be something to be part of this conversation for a long time, if not permanently. Are they bringing up those conversations, and are they revisiting what we should do with this money so we actually can create and design the school for what is actually happening now?
So I think we're really lucky that we hadn't begun major construction on our facilities pre-COVID, because we're still in the design phase for a lot of our work. So it's going to allow us to be more creative as we enter into that design phase and saying what new measures need to be implemented in order to support our students during this new kind of phase of life that we are all becoming accustomed to. However, even more broadly beyond that, I think that our design team that we are working on for many of these projects that would fall under the $160 million, they have been integrated in this process. They began doing outreach with our team in 2017, and they have been with us every step of the way through the stage 1 and stage 2 submission to where we are now. So we've been engaging the district at the most basic of levels, talking to folks at the PTO, talking to administrators, talking to teachers, and trying new things out along the way. And we're going to continue to be that fluid and flexible as we go through this entire process. So it's not necessarily, some of these things aren't perfectly defined because they're general categories. The warm, safe, dry work is more specific. And we need to be thoughtful about our HVAC system. I'm sorry, what was that?
I know you earmarked some of the subject matter, student innovation. It seems that one of the things that we learned during this COVID crisis was the lack of broadband access to the children and the kids. Is that something that we should be plugging in now to all our schools so that we don't get caught flat-footed again, knowing that you're probably going to have to do so? I feel like we can spend money for that type of innovation too, right?
I definitely think that we're looking towards what the new learning environment is, and even more beyond just 21st century learning, but 21st century learning now. And so that is a fundamental part of our design process, and making sure that we're thinking about what the challenges are for our students today, but also what will be the challenges for our students in 5 or 10 years. So yes, sir, that is incorporated absolutely in that process.
Great. I'm sure we all look forward to hearing more about that. I think we can now switch over to the next step of the conversation, which is administration's request to do an additional want to borrow another $100 million and put it on the ballot for November and get the people to vote yes or no to approve another $100 million for school construction. So, Mr. Mancini, first, tell us that process. Tell us, I guess there's a time constraint where it seems like August 2nd. Can you tell us what took so long for administration to bring this up to the council's attention in such a late stage of the game? I mean, as you know, the finance committee and the council's meetings, the entire COVID-19 crisis, I can say that at least for our part, at least this legislative branch of government has been functioning during these trying times when numerous other legislative branches have not. So first my concern is, first put aside the merit of borrowing more money for school construction. My question is, why is the council just hearing about it now and being put into, once again, a rock and a hard place, right? And I want on the record, was that by design? If not by design, please explain why. So let's start with that question first.
Mr. Chairman, so with due respect and of the highest order to the council, including this committee, no such program was done by design. I will tell you that because of the extra due diligence associated with some critical changes in strategy that will result in additional awarding of dollars if in fact we are successful based on student-centric and the so-called newer and fewer. A significant shift in design prospect was developed not but a month ago, and there was really no opportunity to determine at what point that process could be completed because it had to go through not only RIDE, but the SBA had to weigh in on it. This day, and myself have worked significantly and collaboratively with officials from both SBA and RIDE, particularly SBA, who literally have guided us to a better position to identify greater opportunities to utilize the same capital, the same authority, and result in a far greater yield of dollars that would have been wasted had we not done that. And that was a watershed moment for us. Quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, at that point, we were still making proper identification of the projects and therefore the dollar value. It was not intentional. It was not a delay that we lay blame to. We respect mightily this committee's authority and this council's granting privileges. We ask that you take that into consideration. And I know it's a tight timeline. We had always expected that there would be some August deadline to get to the Secretary of State. For no other reason, sir, other than a nearly complete and exhaustive turnaround of project identification and proper and best use of those projects and those dollars, did we arrive at the new plan, which will contemplate up to $140 million of new voter authority, and combined with the existing $160 million, that $300 million, if successful in its implementation, $230 million of that will be bond borrowing, which we have the capacity to meet that. The remaining 70 will be done under the auspices of PAYGO, which has been agreed to and nearly approved already. Ms. Day can give the finer details on that, or if you choose, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we can wait until Thursday evening. I had already given much of this briefing to your treasurer in your internal order last Friday morning, basically working with Ms. Day to explain the process of the financing part of this and the success of why this would make sense for the city. I want to point out to the committee.
So the process itself of the state conversation, to get something, to have it on the ballot for November, what is the due date the Secretary of State has presented?
Ms. Day, can you help me with that?
I believe that's August 4th.
August 4th. August 4th, okay. So, and I want the committee to know and the council to know that this matter has not, there's been no matter sitting in the Finance Committee, Mr. Mancini, can you attest to the fact that the Finance Committee has not been sitting on anything concerning this matter?
That is correct.
Right. So I want to make sure everybody knows that, so any council members who are under any misinformation, I want to make sure you all know that the Finance Committee is the first time it's been brought to our attention, the first time we're actually having a conversation, so the committee members to know that. And I want the council members to know that. I want to know that. So August 4th is the date the Secretary of State would need what from the city so we could put a bond initiative for November. Ms. Day, could you tell us?
Yes, of course. So what would need to be received by the Secretary of State's office is something from the Board of Canvassers that attests that they've received a resolution from the City Council authorizing the voters to have a ballot initiative approving the $140 million. So that would have to be received by the Secretary of State's office, I believe on August 4th. I will reconfirm that date. But our Board of Canvassers also has to take action upon it before it can go to the Secretary of State's office.
So it's a council resolution, and it would be to request to put a question on the ballot in November to say whether or not that we can bond out another $100 million for school construction, right? Now, if that timeline is met, and then the bond initiative goes on November, and it's passed, which most likely it will, because voters always vote yes for bond initiative. One, will it be a standalone bond initiative, or will it be buried with other bond initiatives?
Standalone.
Okay. Number two, the next step after that would be, although the voters approve, the next step would be then you would have to then put together a plan and then come back to the council. Is this correct?
Absolutely.
and then get an audit, I'm trying to, let me just cut to it. Then get an ordinance passed, so you can then have the legal authority to actually go out to the banks. Is that correct, Mr. Mancini? And bond the money?
That is absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman. No such borrowing will occur without the council having the opportunity and the due diligence to review the project list, the costs associated with it, and then the authority will be granted to go out and conduct any bond borrowing. That is correct.
So the committee members, council, so that's way we understand the new council members in particular, old council members, the old codgers on the council, that would be the process. So it's would be a resolution passed by the council, the Board of Canvassers, Secretary of State. Bond initiative goes on the ballot in November. Voters vote yes. Then there's a whole process of, like Ms. Day's talking about, what money, how much money, what to spend it on, how to spend it, and then it'll be put into a ordinance form, and then it'll go back to the council, come to the finance committee, and the committee can vet it, the council members can vet it, and then you can move on. And clearly, by the way, the last bond initiative, we've taken 2 years anyway to get where we are today, so it's still a long process. So it's like it doesn't happen right away, even upon passage of the ordinance. Because we haven't even taken any of the initial bond money out, correct?
That is correct.
And sir, if I can just
I just want to make sure I'm describing the process correct, okay?
That's correct. So that process is very, very accurate. We would also simultaneously to that be going through the appropriate school building authority approval process for that proposed $140 million. And so that would require a stage 1 submission in September and a stage 2 submission in February of 2021 with a potential May 2021 approval. And so before we would even go to borrow for any of those projects, we would build out a project schedule that would align with our potential borrowing capacity, and then we would begin the council approval process once the projects have been approved.
Thank you, Ms. Day. Councilwoman Anthony, then President Pro Tem Correa. Councilwoman Anthony?
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I just have one more question for Ms. Day. So if we have to, if you have to get Board of Elections approval, is that what I understand, before the August 4th, when does council have to act? By what day? I don't know if the Board of Elections is...
Board of Canvassers.
I'm sorry, Board of
Canvassers.
The Board of Canvassers is receiving it, Councilman. I think the way it goes is the council would pass the resolution goes to the Board of Canvassers, and we're putting the Board of Canvassers on notice that we'd like to have a ballot question, and their job is to put the Secretary of State on notice to put it, because they're doing the ministerial aspect of creating the ballot itself.
Thank you.
And
they don't have to meet and vote.
They would need to get that.
Board of Canvassers do not have to meet and vote, do they?
I think they do.
They do.
So they would need a 48-hour notice for posting. So that would mean that I believe the council would need to take action on a resolution that would approve voters seeing this on the ballot as early as Friday or as late as Friday in order to be able to give the Board of Canvassers enough time to review and approve and receive that and notify the Secretary of State's office that we are in receipt of that document.
Does the Secretary of State's office have some discretion? Let's say the Board of Canvassers misses by an hour. Can the Secretary of State still receive it? You know what I'm talking about? Because it's like, we're not talking matter of months. Is there discretion, does the Secretary of State have discretion that if we get it to them and, let's say, I'm just looking at worst case scenario, the Board of Canvassers misses the official 48-hour notice, right? And they have to do it on August 5th and vote it out. Does the Secretary of State grant discretion or exception? So, do we know that? And if we don't, can we find out?
We are in conversations with the Secretary of State's office to determine if there would be any leniency. And it does, I don't want to speak for them or on their behalf. So I would say that they have been open to supporting us getting this on the ballot. But we do need to move as quickly as possible to be respectful of their deadlines. So that is the information that I've been shared. And so that's what I would say to the body.
And I would support that.
Please be
I would
flexible,
support that
say
statement.
by an hour or two, Mr. Mancini.
I would support Ms. Day's statement that our senior staff is in contact with representatives of the Secretary of State's office, and we were asked to do our best efforts to get it done within the structure. Then perhaps would be courtesy given if we had a slight change, but as it stands now, we're working within the structure.
Councilman Anthony, you have a follow-up question?
No, I think that's clear. I mean, I know in order, so we have a little flexibility possibly, but we're not sure. And that we would have to, if we were to adhere to the letter of the law, we would have to have a meeting on Friday, is what I'm understanding.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Any follow-up, Councilwoman? Okay. All set?
All set. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. President Pro Tem Correa?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to get some clarification on the amount that we were asking the voters to approve. So I thought it was 120, now I'm being told I'm hearing 140.
So Larry can speak to the specifics, but it's related to our pay-go calculation, which is factored into the overall voter approval. Larry, do you want to explain more?
So, thank you, Ms. Day. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission to address Pro Tem, the granting of the authority by the voters is in total, depending upon the methodology that we decide is in the best interest of the city. So the granting of the authority that we're seeking is 140 million. 120 million will more than likely be done by bond borrowing under typical bond borrowing conditions, while the remaining 20 will be done under PAYGO. PAYGO is a program that works off the state's bonding capacity and where they have funds already available and they put it into the projects on a pari per sue basis. They'll put in 82 cents on the dollar, we put in the 18 cents to make up the entire 100 cents on the dollar. But that still requires authority to borrow or be indebted up to and no greater than 140 million, even though there's a reimbursement. And remember, this is all going to be done under the reimbursement process.
All right, thank you.
President
And Mr. Chairman.
Yes. I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mancini, I just want to make sure, but the 140 would be, the obligation would be on the city's bond indebtedness, not the state.
Absolutely.
Is that correct? So the city still carries that on the books, although you have this $20 million pay-go thing with the state, right?
The city would carry only the true bond indebtedness under the bond indebtedness cap and limitation, which would be on a 140 voter granting of your authority to conduct your borrowing, 120 by bonds, 20 by PAYGO. And that meets the criteria established by our fiscal advisors under the allowance of maximum debt capacity. And may I say, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it also meets sufficiently within the budgetary strategy of never borrowing more than borrow less. If I may just say, Mr. Chairman, when this process is complete, between the current submitted budget of FY21 debt service and in the year FY25, which is the year that follows the last tranche of borrowing that we would propose under this consolidated authority of the 160 and the 140, which really means 110 and 120 for a total of 230 million of bond borrowing. The difference would be PAYGO. It's all been worked out with SBA and RIDE. We would, in the net, while the gross debt service would change by nearly $13 million, even at only the 82% reimbursement, our new debt impact on the budget would be only $2.4 million annually in that fifth year. And I'm willing to tell the committee that could change to less than 1.2 million if we receive all of the bonus points associated with newer and fewer, student-centric, et cetera, et cetera. And with that said, Mr. Chairman, there is still in the non-school borrowing capacity, while it's been reserved for another CIP consideration in fiscal 22, if we chose not to do that, that bond savings in that year is approximately 2.9 million of debt service capacity, which would basically self-pay for this borrowing on the city side, the portion that we're responsible for. I have worked with those numbers with Mr. Craig from Hilltop Securities. They've been shared with your internal auditor and your treasurer in conversation last Friday. We will be prepared to discuss that again this Thursday evening, or if necessary, sooner, or by the date of the meeting. But the point being that a great deal of work went into structuring the proper tranche of borrowing to lighten any impact to budget considerations over the next 5 years.
Mr. Mancini, the 160 itself right now, have we borrowed that money yet?
No, sir.
So
No,
right
sir.
now, that's not on the city's bond indebtedness right now. We're not making any payments. We're not there yet.
That is correct, sir.
So right now, that's not on our books. It's just when eventually they will come on our books, right?
Exactly.
So
by that amount, less the pay-go, which we're expecting to be only 110 million of the 160.
But right now, it's not on our books. There's no monthly
That is
payment.
correct.
Okay. And so, do we have any concern about the interest rate? The interest rate's at all-time low right now, right?
Yeah,
So I was wondering about that aspect. And then the next step is, when do we anticipate that we will go out for those, not the original 160, or are you looking to do it both? If the other 140, is that what you're saying? I'm looking for another 140, was it?
140 in authority, but it would be a bond borrowing of 120 with 20 pay-go.
So are you looking to bundle both the 160 in that one when bond out, or you're still looking just to?
Probably not, Mr. Chairman, because don't forget, we have to take into accountability project plan, spending, and completion ability. We certainly wouldn't want to borrow 230 million and we couldn't spend it in a year or 2 years. So we would do it strategically. We were prepared. We were prepared from the longest time to close on a bond issue upwards of 100, maybe 110 million of that 160 as earlier and no sooner than July 1. And the reason why, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that we always pick the start of a new fiscal year is because the way bond repayment works is the next full bond repayment payment of debt service doesn't occur until the following fiscal year, giving you that full year to reposition your budget, as we have successfully done in every bond that we've done in the last half decade.
How long can the city keep that option open, or the 160? Can you keep it forever? Like, could you keep it open that maybe 5 years from now you go out the bond?
No,
Is there a time frame to go out for the money?
5 years max. We've already seen 2 go by.
So now we're going into our third year of the.
We got 3 years to spend it. We've got 3 years to spend the first. We have 3 years to spend the initial voter approval of 160.
Exactly. So
and then you'll get 5. You'll get 5 new years if we.
I know, hang on. Let's talk about the 160. Do we have 3 more years to take out the 160? And do we have to spend the 160 within the 3 years? Or can we take out the 160 3 years from now and then?
No.
So we have a 3-year window now to spend the original 160. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
And if things work out well and we pass an additional bond initiative in November, that clock starts again for that initiative for 5 years, correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
So I want to make sure that everybody understands that. The next question.
And thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for that opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity.
I think it's important people understand what the time frame and how these things work, because you can't keep it on the books forever if you don't spend it.
That's right.
Or the option.
Mr. Chairman.
And one other thing, do we have any bond indebtedness that we've retired in the past year, and/or do we expect to any bond indebtedness to be retired in the next 12 months, 24 months?
Well, that's the whole point. The whole point of keeping the debt service payment as close to the last debt service payment, as each time a prior issued debt service of some 20 years ago falls off the city's books, that's when we have priced and sized the next tranche of bond borrowing. Let me just reflect on that for a minute, Mr. Chairman. With the cooperation of your team, you may recall, we were going to borrow on the CIP, non-school, we were going to borrow in 2 $50 million tranches, February of 20 and February of 2021. We said as early as this time last year, market conditions are right. Affordability is within reach. We don't know what the economy might look like next year post-presidential. We had no idea of COVID, none whatsoever then. But we made the correct decision. Take it all down in one shot, lower underwriting costs, beneficial on interest rate, outstanding premium that we earn. That was a significant attribute of the collaboration of the administration and the council to see it that way by saying, instead of being so strict and only waiting 1 year apart, we took it all down when the timing of the market allowed us to do that. And I want to commend everybody who participated because that was the correct decision. And we'll do that again where need be as we go through the various tranches of debt service that comes off the city books, allowing us to recapitalize those funds into new debt borrowing. So it's difficult to predict the interest rate today, but we'll do it as judicious as possible.
Well, I would think the interest rate's going to stay pretty low for the next 3 years.
I would think so. I would think so too.
That rock bottom now, no matter who becomes president, it's not going to be with the interest rate. Unless something additional crisis occurs.
I would.
But the question I have is, can you, not for now, but can you submit, give it to us for Thursday, the latest bond indebtedness again, chart?
Yes.
What's out there now? What's the plan behind, the whole index, the index, all right? You do that for us?
I have already provided a copy to the internal auditor and the treasurer since last week, but we'll give a refreshed version and we'll have it ready for Thursday evening.
Thank you. Committee members, do you have any other comments or questions about this time? The treasurer?
Yeah, if I may, on Friday, I'd just like to get the council to get this information because I know that many of them are waiting for it. And that's the 160 that we already spoke about. The estimate on the new spending or how you plan on spending it. Some comment from Karen Grandy that a written comment that she agrees that and I fully agree, but I want to hear it from Karen Grandy as well, that the council, that the resolution does not authorize the city to borrow without the council. And
exactly.
You should probably send the resolution out to make sure that everybody has read it. And if a meeting's called, at least they'll be prepared for it.
We can provide those consolidated documents to you. I think I would defer to Chief Mancini regarding the debt capacity models being distributed, but the other materials are easily able to be provided as soon as this evening or first thing tomorrow.
And I know that we had some questions about the resolution about percentages and everything, and I don't want to get into it here, but I think that we should probably see it publicly before we comment.
I did follow up with our bond counsel just to follow up on that conversation that we did have on Friday. And just because there was the weekend. So I did follow up to see if we could get clarification and just get that confirmation in writing as soon as humanly possible.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments or questions by committee members, council members? All right, Mr. Mancini, I think you got the last, make it brief, hopefully, Councilman.
I will. So, Mr. Chairman, for my benefit.
Councilman Mancini, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I'm just trying to, getting late in the evening. Mancini, you can do your last.
Mr. Chairman, just for my own edification, is it my understanding that there will be the introduction and single passage on the same evening on Friday evening because of the simplicity of it, that it's going to be permission to put the question on the ballot, and it is not obligating the council, not for one iota, not one penny. But I needed to know, will it be completed as a voted upon resolution, or does it have to go back to committee and then go back out? Because in my opinion, it's a resolution. From what Ms. Grandy has told us in the past, it does not require referral to committee by your council rules. I'm certainly not inferring that I know those rules better than you. I just want to be clear about that.
So first of all, let me say this. I appreciate Attorney Grandy. She's good at what she does. She needs to stay out of the procedures of what we do here. But traditionally, what you normally would do is when any time the city's looking to borrow such a substantial amount of money, it would be properly, fully vetted. So what we're trying to do is this evening, and hopefully Thursday, get understanding and greater vetting of this process, what it is. So hopefully, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of the council's time because it's going to be up to leadership and the other council members, that'll be how they want to handle it on, if it does go up on Friday. So how that plays out, I leave it up to leadership, the president, et cetera. But as far as the normal course of business would be that if a resolution was submitted to this, it would go to the finance committee, we vet it. What we are trying to do is understanding the time frame. Once again, this committee is accommodating, and the council, that we are trying to address that vetting process as best as we can, although we don't actually have it before us. So this way, if the council feels that they believe they want to have the ability to put it on the ballot, this committee will not be prohibiting or a prohibition to that execution. That's why we're discussing it tonight. Because pretty much you're laying it all out, what you're talking about, what you're trying to do, what's the amount of money. You're not going to be taking it right away. What's the process? The process is to vote approval. Then after that, still got to go back to the full council. Then it goes back to the finance committee to figure out how you're going to spend it. And clearly, it's going to take a couple of years from then. So most likely, the future council that Councilman Anthony is going to be on and the other council colleagues will be on next term, they'll be hashing this $160 million conversation probably 4 years from now or 3 years from now. So I don't want to necessarily be in the position where they felt that they needed that additional funding. So they say the past council hampered our ability to take out money to rehabilitate our schools. Does that make sense, everybody?
It does.
So that's why we're having this evening's conversation, so we can kind of go through it, so the public understands what we're doing. So, like anything, no matter even whether it was this item or not, whenever you talk about public borrowing, it's not necessarily just about the council person's personality wanting to know. It's the people that we represent in this great republic. As long as I'm here, it's still a republic. Someday, I'm sure we'll turn it to something else. I don't know, but right now it's a republic. So we just want to make sure the public knows what we're doing, and that's what we're doing here. This way, on Friday, if the council wants to move forward with it, there's been a good, I believe, pretty deep conversation and a public vetting on what you're proposing to do. And I'll defer to my committee members. I presume you agree with what I'm presenting. Councilwoman Anthony, is that right?
Yes, I think so, Mr. Chair. I think you've said it very well.
Right? We don't want to do a disservice to the public so they feel that we did something. Think about it. We didn't talk about it at all. All of a sudden, Friday night at midnight, the council passes $100 million worth of borrowing, and the public reads about it the next day. We think that's why we're trying to deal with it the best way we can based on the time constraints we're under. This way, the public has an opportunity. But also the school department, the school buildings, the children in the schools, the students have a better environment to learn. At the end of the day, it's for the kids. So it's really about them. So I believe we covered that. Anything else from committee members?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Day?
I just wanted to first say thank you for the opportunity to go over this tonight, because I think you're right, Chairman. We couldn't do this without a public discussion. I also just want to note additionally that by having this bifurcated process, it'll allow us to move forward on work so much faster. And so I'm looking forward to demonstrating that on Thursday with additional documentation before the committee. And I think that will really inform any decisions that need to be made. But I think this was a really healthy discourse and allows me to know exactly where we need to go for Thursday night.
Thank you. And I would just ask, but in the future, I'm here for the rest of the term, that I ask that when you're looking for these types of things, to get it, let's get ahead of it as much as we can so we can go through the public vetting, so we can give the transparency, we can give the full discourse earlier than, towards the end. So I ask the administration to work on that initiative for future reference.
Chairman, I hope to never go through this experience like this again.
Is there anything else from committee members, council members on this matter? So that I think we vetted it. We'll hear from you. Actually, we're going to continue, Ms. Jordan, for next Thursday, but to talk about the 160. That's what we're going to be talking about. And if you want to talk some more about the potential borrowing, Mr. Mancini, and of course, the bond indebtedness, that'd be helpful. And then if council members have additional questions about the proposed potentially, and I'm not speaking on what's going to happen, let's hypothetically say it's on Friday. Council members have any questions about what's on Friday, can ask on Thursday. Does that make sense? So I want to make sure that happens. I leave that up to the council leadership, the president, and the folks, and how they want to handle that. I'm not going to make a commitment. That's her call, and I respect the president's position in how she proceeds and how she handles it. So with that, I would ask for a motion to continue item number 6 for this Thursday. For the next council, how do I phrase it, Mr. Clerk? The next council, going to continue item 6 to.
The next final. Either way is fine.
Okay. Can we have a motion to continue item number 6 for the next council finance meeting? Which
So moved.
in theory is going to be this Thursday.
Second.
So moved.
Anthony makes that motion, by Councilman Taylor. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
There's nothing before this honorable committee. So,
Motion to adjourn.
clerks again, by the way,
Second.
really- but thank everybody, thank all the committee members, council members, administration. I think it was a very good discussion. We have a motion to adjourn by Councilman Anthony, second by
Second.
Councilman Taylor, right?
Right.
Yep.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr.
Be
Chairman.
well,